Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Listen, now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because we believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing his greatness. I am your host, Mitchell Osman, and I'm so grateful and I'm humbled that you've decided to choose to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. And listen, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I'm so excited for today's episode. I'm extra excited because we're going to be talking about how to raise your son to become a strong and courageous man. And I'm excited because I got a son myself and I've got a lot to learn. So today we're going to be talking with a gentleman by the name of Dennis Morolda. All right, so Dennis is a father of three, and he's a mentor of countless young men. He's the founder and the CEO of Building Men, which is a motivational destination for real talk about purpose, mindset, and connections, and the foundational building blocks to success. He's a former teacher, a coach, and a principal. And Dennis now works with individuals, schools, and organizations all over the country, providing professional development, assembly programming, motivational speaking, and group coaching. Dennis specializes in working with young men navigating the difficult terrains of adolescence. Dennis has counseled, mentored, and coached thousands of young men in middle school and high school to build confidence and to create healthy lifestyle habits, overcome self-limiting beliefs, and to understand the importance of living with character and integrity. All right, so we got a lot to talk about today. This is a power-packed episode with tons of gold nuggets for you to take away from this. So I'm going to jump straight into it, okay? All right, let's see you over there. Well, hello, Dennis, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Dad Nation podcast. I want to say thank you for spending your time with us today. I've been following you for about a year or so now, and I just want to say, man, I love your content, love your mission. Of course, I am biased because I have a young boy that I'm raising right now, and so I'm going to be taking extra notes. But thank you, man, for joining us, and I know that you're going to have so much to share with our guys who are listening. And so as we kick off, I know I introduced you a little bit, your bio in the beginning, but tell us a little bit more about yourself, man. So a little bit about your family. You're married, you have kids, kind of all that kind of stuff.
Mitch, man, thanks for having me on, dude. Really appreciate it. And I love what you're doing too. I love the platform. You're giving dads a space to speak and to share their stuff and to learn from one another. Definitely needed. Wish I had it when I was a young dad. So appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell the story too. So I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version of my story. I'm the oldest of four. I grew up in a family with a father who believed in a lot of the toxic male ideologies. I don't like the term toxic masculinity. I like to, because I think masculinity is a really, really positive thing. So to me, it's an oxymoron. So I use toxic male ideologies. I think that's a different way to put it that I'm more comfortable with. But he believed in a lot of those things. He was not a good man. He was not a loving father. Very abusive in many different ways, physically, emotionally. Mentally with me, and I bore the brunt of it. Me and my mother bore the brunt of it, and a lot of what I did as I was growing up, Mitch, was trying to learn what is a man, because I did not have a good role model. It was a lot around physical dominance and fear. It was around telling stories of sexual conquests, like when he was younger, all the girls that he was with and how hot the girls were. And he would cut class to go hang out with the hottest chick in school, and that was more important than his education, or more important than personal or development or professional development. And then it was about the stuff, making the money, making sure that you had the things to make other people jealous of whatever you had. And so I was really confused as I was growing up. I knew I was really scared of him. And I knew that I didn't want to be like him, but I didn't know anything else. He was the guy who coached all the teams. So from the outside, it looked a certain way. We lived in the house that looked a certain way. We had the parties. He dressed a certain way. But I didn't know what a man was. So I constantly struggled with that growing up. Knew what I didn't want to do, but I could learn how not to be an airplane pilot by, playing video games. I wanted to learn what it was like to be a man. So I was constantly looking at, sports figures. I was looking at guys like, Chevy Chase and Christmas Vacation. I was like, well, this dad is like, he's kind of goofy, but he loves his kids. He would do anything for them. I was enamored by guys like Robin Williams and like Dead Poet Society and Good Will Hunting, like guys that are like, they're strong figures, but were also able to show their emotion. And I had a couple really significant situations as I was growing up with my father, but I was always, again, searching. So what I decided to do is and at the same time, I was a good athlete as I was growing up. So it was sports, it was my friends, and I did well in school. Those are the things that really drove me. And a lot of it was like an FU to my old man. A lot of it was like, I'm going to do this to show you that I can do it. And so I wound up doing really well in high school, especially in baseball, and wound up playing baseball at the college level, majored in education and in sociology. Wanted to become a teacher, wanted kids eventually to not have to go through what I went through. I went through a lot of difficult situations, especially in middle school. And I was always thinking, I wish I had a guy here. I wish I had a teacher here, a mentor here, someone here that saw what was happening in my life, both in school and at home. Didn't have it. So I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And part of my educational journey, I wound up working at an internship. It was like a halfway home for at-risk boys. So boys were in this program, and I was 21 years old, so right around my junior year of college. Boys were in this program because they were the victims of either physical or sexual abuse, or they had committed a crime. So the court system said you have to be a part of this program. So I was an internship, and I did an internship, and I'm learning how to counsel boys in a group setting and an individual setting. I was doing this for a couple months, and then they wound up hiring me as a van driver. So now, Mitch, I'm 21 years old, and I'm going to some really, really rough areas in South Jersey, picking these kids up after school, and most of them were anywhere between 14 and 17 years old. And I'm picking them up after school and then driving them to this halfway home and spending the next 6 or 7 hours with them. And then I would drive them either to a residential facility or back to their house at night, depending on their program. And then those van rides home, and now it's 10, 11 o'clock at night after I've just spent the last 6 or 7 hours with them, the van rides home became this mobile counseling center where there was, me and about 8 boys on this van ride home, and they were opening up to me, this goofy 21-year-old, about things that they weren't talking to these clinically trained social workers, psychologists, and counselors about. And then they were asking me to take the long way home, Mitch, and all of a sudden, like, it was a half-hour drive, 45-minute drive. Now they're like, can we go the long way so we have more time to talk? And then it would be like, can I be the last one dropped off so I have some like one-on-one time with you? And at the moment, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I didn't know my ass from my elbow, but I'm also at the same time learning so much, not only in the clinical sense in my classrooms, but in the practical sense of like doing it. And I decided I'm going to do something with this in the future. I didn't know what that was. I had no idea. Wound up teaching for a couple of years. My third day teaching in central New Jersey was September 11th of 2001. So I was indoctrinated into the educational profession with this catastrophic event, one of the worst situations in the history of our country, and recognized right then and there, it's so important to provide a space for kids to feel safe in a classroom. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I knew that right off the bat in the classroom. And so again, I decided to frame my experience in education around providing a safe space for kids, and it being more about the connection than it was about the curriculum or the content. I also recognized at that time, Mitch, that I wanted to do something in a leadership capacity. I was like, I really enjoy, being the guy in charge. I liked, running meetings, and I liked those things. So I decided right away, I'm going to go back and get my master's in school leadership to become a principal. I'm like, I'm going to take that step. So I went back really quickly, fast tracked it. Within 3 years, I was a principal of a middle school, and I was in my mid 20s at the time and really young to be a principal. But I recognized as soon as I started, all of the stuff that I was dealing with, like all of the issues in the school, were with the boys. It was with the boys that were getting in trouble, getting thrown out of class, failing, coming to school late, all the fights, everything was with the boys. So I decided I'm going to start a group for the boys, much like the van rides that I was driving around, many years before. So I started a boys group, and I called it Building Men. And one of the first meetings, I asked the boys, I said, all right, build me a man. Tell me about what is a man. And they went back to the stuff that my father was telling me, which young men in society are like, we're indoctrinated with these things. Well, you got to have a six pack. You got to be able to bench a certain amount. You got to be able to dunk or throw the football this far. You got to be able to physically beat people up. That means you're the man. you got to bang the most girls or the hottest girls, right? That meant that you were the man. And then you got to have the stuff. You got to make the money. You got to have the house on the hill. You got to have the sneakers, the car, what have you. That all will make you the man. And so what it decided to do was distinguish between being the man and being a man of character, integrity, that can lead and serve other people. So we redesigned the idea of masculinity, and we, understood it around being accountable, being authentic, being resilient, having self-discipline, leading, showing respect, being resilient, and then serving other people in some capacity. And in 1 year of the program running, like, everything in the school changed. The kids' grades got better. They came to school on time, and the disciplinary incidents dropped 75% in one.
Wow.
And what I'm currently doing, I'm seeing the same exact results 20 something years later. So I started this program in 2005, so it's almost 20 years later, and I'm still seeing the same results as I go into schools right now. That's where Building Men started, and it went through a couple iterations. But I left being a principal in 2019, and it turned into many, many years and blood, sweat, and tears, and some really sketchy times where I had no money whatsoever as I was trying to build up a business around Building Men.
Hey, I promise we're going to get back to this episode, but I just wanted to take a few seconds to tell you about a free marriage course that I'm offering, no charge, and it's called Remodel Your Marriage. And it's a 4-step blueprint to understanding your wife, keeping your cool, and getting the fire back in your marriage. And in this course, we're going to dig into the 4 foundations that every successful couple understands well. And that's number 1, how to love each other well. Number 2, how to feel and how to communicate how you feel, how to communicate through conflict. Number 3 is how to fight fair and how to fight well. And then number 4 is how to have fun and to break out of that routine of becoming just really great roommates. And so if you're watching this and maybe you would say that your marriage is feeling a little stale, maybe needs a little remodeling or refreshing, all you need to do is head to dadnationco.com/remodel for that free course for you, my friend. I put a lot of time and energy into it, and I believe that it can help you transform your marriage. I believe in the marriage model. I believe in you and your marriage, my friend. All right, let's get back to the episode. Wow, man. Well, hey, thank you for sharing. That's a cool story, and that statistic is absolutely wild. And you know what, man? Thank you for all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into it, because I know, and you know that you've changed the lives of hundreds and potentially thousands of people. And we know that you'll never know the ripple effect of, the relationships and other relationships that are affected by the boys that you help become men. So thank you for sharing that story, man. So really what we're saying here is, you know what you're talking about. If anybody's qualified to talk about this, it could be you.
Father of 3 kids. I have a son who's going to be 19 in the middle of March. I have 2 daughters, a girl who's 16 and a daughter who's 13 as well. So not only was like my experience as a teacher, as an administrator with what I'm doing now with Building Men, but I've also gone through it as a dad. So I've experienced all the sides of it as well.
Yeah, man. Well, we were talking about a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and when we were just chatting on the phone, and we were talking a little bit about like the vacancy, of strong, courageous men in the nuclear family, and the distortion of masculinity versus toxic masculinity, and a lot of what's going on. And I just had a conversation with a guy from New York yesterday who was talking about the suicide rates in men and how they're medicating, and it's not just older men, it's young men who are coming up, and so. When we're thinking about this, somewhere along the way, we went wrong. Somewhere along the way, we started doing things maybe not as good as we could have. And so, in your experience, 20 years, I mean, that's a generation. So, what do you think happens to us, or where is it that we go wrong when it comes to raising a boy and then becoming a man, and him having all the wrong sort of values and perspectives as to what masculinity actually looks like? Can you pinpoint anything?
I don't know. It's like chicken or the egg kind of thing. There were a lot of things where we went off the wires a little bit. I think a lot of it was technology raising our kids rather than us raising our kids. There's a stat that I saw that the average teenage boy currently spends 30 minutes over the course of a week in a one-on-one conversation with an adult male role model. 30 minutes.
Wow.
Conversely, the same boy spends an average of 44 hours a week interacting with a video screen of in some sort. So 90 times more they're spending interacting with a screen, television, computer, video games, smartphone, 90 times more than they're interacting with an adult male role model. I would start there and say that's something that has gone off the tracks a little bit. We're letting technology raise our kids rather than us raising our kids.
Mm.
Is it harder for us as dads to come home from work after a long day and sit on the couch and not get on our phone and not put on the game and not open a beer and another beer and another beer and sit and talk to our kids about their day and about like have a lesson for the week that we can dive into a little bit, play a game, get outside and run around and do things? Yes, that'll take more of an investment. But guess what? You have a very finite amount of time with your kids, and the time that you spend investing right now, you're helping to not raise an asshole or a douchebag, especially if you're raising a son. So invest that time now. And here's the thing, the cat in the cradle is going to be playing. My son is a freshman college at the University of Delaware. And I mean, it was one of those things. I've made mistakes as a dad. I've made many mistakes. One mistake that I didn't make was like I knew that I had a specific amount of time with him, and I wasn't going to waste that time. So, and the time that I invested in him as he was growing up, now I'm seeing the benefit of it. Like we talk almost every single day, and this is a
Mm.
kid. He's down at the University of Delaware. He could be partying and doing whatever, and he calls his dad, and we talk probably 5 times a week right now. And I'm
Wow.
not saying like, well, I did everything right. I didn't, but that was one thing that I've certainly learned. I think that there's a lot of it is just parents, the generation that I grew up in. I think there was a lot of fear-based things that were going on. I was in the Gen X thing where, you got home from school and you were outside until the streetlights came on.
Mhm.
And then over the summers, we went on adventures and we were just out. We rode our bikes all over the place. No one knew where the hell we were, and we would come back and you got bruised up and you got into fights and those things happen and you learn to deal with them. Now our kids are so scheduled and everything is like they're tracked nonstop. We know exactly what they're doing at all moments and where they're going and who they're doing it with, which to an extent I say you want to protect your kids, right? We have the ability to do so, but they're not able to be kids anymore. They don't go on adventures and explore, and we don't let our kids fail. Like we
Mm.
don't let our kids experience frustration. And I just heard Andrew Huberman had a recent podcast, and there was an expert about parenting, and they were asking about entitlement, and she defined entitlement, which I absolutely loved, as the fear of frustration. And I started to think about it a little bit. And what happens in my experience as a school principal too, Mitch, was that parents want to come in and solve all of the problems for their kids. So as the kid starts to experience some level of frustration, there's frustration, and then there's a rescue by the parent. Frustration,
Mm.
rescue, frustration, rescue. I didn't make the team. Well, I'm going to call the coach and we're going to have a meeting in the school. You got an F on this assignment? Well, I'm going to call the teacher and we're going to get that changed. You fell down. Well, we're going to fix this right away. So the kid, once they feel that level of frustration, the parent comes in and fixes it. And what the kid sees when there's the frustration, the rescue, there must be some fear on the side of the parent that is not letting me go through this frustration. So then frustration becomes associated with fear and then not feeling safe. So as kids are growing up and they're unable to feel that frustration, it rewires their brain to frustration can be a really good thing. There's this.
Mm.
There's a great TED talk called the Super Mario Effect, and the author of it, his name is Mark Rober, and he did this TED talk. Highly recommend your audience listen to this.
All right.
You remember the video game Super Mario Brothers,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Um, and so the old Super Mario Brothers, it started. I don't know what the new one is like, but I remember playing the original Super Mario Brothers, and it's you have Mario, and he's this Italian plumber, and he starts off as this big guy, and then if he gets into some trouble, a turtle comes and hits him, he shrinks down, and he gets a little bit smaller. And you're like, oh, I'm little Mario, I can't make a mistake here or whatever. And you jump on the thing and you try to save Princess Peach from Bowser, and you make some mistakes. And after your little Mario, you fall into the pit and you die. You go back to the beginning of the level.
Mhm.
You don't go back to the beginning of the game. It's not like, well, the game is over now because you made a mistake. No, you go back to the beginning of level 3, 2. And the next time you jump on the turtle, you have to jump and then jump really quickly to hit the
Mhm.
turtle, so you can move on. So what happens by going through that frustration and the failure, you're like, oh, I'm going to learn. a different way to do whatever this thing is. And by doing that, you learn that I can take failure and fail forward from it. And
Mm.
when I'm at school, I talk to kids about that. And as soon as, we sit down, I'm like, one thing that I know about you guys is you're all really resilient because you tried something and you all failed terribly at it. And then you found success. And they're looking at me like, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, you all walked in here. And at one
Mm.
point, none of you were able to walk. None of
Mm.
you walk at some point in your life. But what happened was your parents stood you up and you wobbled around a little bit like a drunken sailor and you fell down. And then they picked you back up again and you took a step and then you fell down. At that point, your parents could have been like, you know what, Mitch, walking's not for you.
Mm.
Go ahead and crawl or do the little scoot on the carpet. That's fine. You don't need to. No, your parents are like, you're going to walk. So we pick you up again and you go through the trials and tribulations. But by doing that, you learn to deal with the frustration and the failure. And then as parents, you do that, they stand a little bit further away from their kids. And the
Mhm.
kid has to go a little bit further, and then they're going to feel frustration, which I highly recommend parents don't ever lose that. Always take that a little bit of a step back from your kid. So this way they know this is going to be frustrating, but I'm stronger than this is hard. And as you're doing that, you're building resilient kids who are not relying on you for everything. One thing I
Mm.
wanted my kids to not need me when they're teenagers. I want them to be able to handle things. They don't have to rely on me for everything. Obviously, I'm there as a safety net if they run into trouble, but I want them to go through those trials and tribulations and deal with frustration in a really positive way. So I love that. Again, it's called the Super Mario effect, and it's a brilliant thing. It's a great thing, a piece of advice as a parent, which is one of the things, going back to your question about like what's going wrong, we're not letting kids fail. We're
Mm.
not there for them. We're not present, and we're solving all the problems for them. So we're developing like weak, mushy kids who are unable to deal with difficult situations.
Hmm. That's so good, man. I read a book called "What Happened to You" last year, and by Dr. Bruce Perry, and he's a child psychologist, and in conjunction with Oprah, and they wrote this book, and the whole thing is about trauma and how we process trauma as children, and then how that manifests as we age. And he talks a lot about a healthy amount of stress and how parents are so quick to jump in and remove all stress and all anxiety. And it's like they have the savior complex. But in reality, it's really wise for a parent to understand, okay, what's a healthy amount of stress? And so he goes through the ages and says, at this age, this is a healthy amount of stress for your child to experience. At this age, this is a healthy amount of stress. And so it's really kind of speaking to what you're saying. It's like, if we're constantly being the savior and taking them out of the situation, how will they ever build any type of emotional or mental resiliency? And that's really cool, man.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
love that.
yeah. And so I got a quick question about, you mentioned toxic masculinity and how you don't like that phrase. And I also don't like it. But there's every time, and I know this because of Dad Nation, anytime I post any post or content about masculinity, there's always somebody dropping in my DMs or making comments about toxicity and all that kind of stuff. So when you're talking with dads or younger, boys or teenagers, whatever the case is, how do you talk to them about masculinity, and how would you define masculinity in a healthy way? And then maybe how that's different from toxic masculinity as we sort of understand it.
And I believe that there are toxic traits that men have,
Mhm.
100%. Like that
Mhm.
ultra aggressive, misogynistic, putting people down, feeling like, it's like the Andrew Tate a little bit gets into that. But like the term toxic masculinity, like I think masculinity should be seen as a positive. They're totally different. Toxicity and masculinity are totally different. So when I think about masculinity, it's like, especially as a father, can you be that rock, that strong, steadfast? And I love the word sturdy as well. It's like you can bend and be emotional and vulnerable but not break. Like your kids know that they can absolutely count on you. And I believe it's that balance between strength and vulnerability.
Mm.
Another piece of advice, and I'll throw in a couple as we go along, just as like little, fun things that I like, little pieces of advice that I've learned along the way or wish that I knew, is when you're sharing stories with your kids, don't just tell them about the game winning shot that you made or the touchdown that you threw, or, when the cheerleader jumped into your arms after the big catch or whatever it is. those are great stories, right? They're awesome stories, but that's not always going to be the case with your own kids.
Mm,
Normalize, like, there's going to be stuff that happens in your life that's not going to go your way, and that's okay. There was a time where I missed the layup that would have won the game for our team, or I overslept one day and I had this great opportunity to do something and I miss it because I was out late hanging out or partying with my friends. So they need to see you as fallible as well. Like, they need to see
mm,
that you're this guy who's overcome, but then also the man that they see in front of them was able to overcome those difficult challenges, was able to rise above, like Phoenix rising from the ashes when there were difficult
mm,
things that happened. So I share the stories with my kids of the good times and the home runs and this and that. But I was also like, you know what? There was a time when I was a sophomore in high school that I was playing on varsity on the basketball team, and I was not a good shooter. I was not a good ball handler. I was a big guy. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 225, and I was able to jump really high. For a white guy, I was able to dunk, and so I was able to block shots. I played good defense, so I was on the varsity team. But there was a big game, and I had an opportunity. If I like back cut, I had a wide open layup in front of me, and I didn't. I stood where I was because I was afraid of missing the shot. So I tell
mm,
my kids that story, and I'm like, I was so afraid of failing in the situation that I didn't have an opportunity to win the game for my team. And we wound up
mm,
losing that game. And you would look at the film and you wouldn't notice that I had an opportunity, but 100% I could have cut to the basket and had an opportunity to win the game. But I didn't. And I tell my kids that story, and I'm like, what a great lesson for them to learn from their father not doing something that he could have done. Long-winded way of me talking about the balance of strength and vulnerability. I also feel, a big piece of masculinity is service. It's leadership. It's all the things that you are 100% talking about with the men who are following along with you.
mm,
But I think it's that space of, like, being the rock, being the calm, steadfast figure that is able to share the things that are going on, but is also able to stand up and be able to protect his family should the situation arise.
mm. That's yeah, man. I love that, and I think you did a really good job at explaining some some masculine qualities. I was reading a little while ago and about the husband's role, the father's role, or the masculine presence role in the home, and they were saying basically it's our job to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. And maybe you've heard that in the past, but a thermostat, of course, is constantly, or a thermometer is constantly up and down, adjusting to the temperature. Thermometer sets the tone. It sets the temperature in the room, and and I love that idea. And now I think with the caveat that we don't, like you said, we don't just be like robots and don't ever express emotion and are just cold and all that stuff. But it is important, I think, that we be the lowest heartbeat in the room. That we're consistent, that we're calm, because there's going to be times when you come home and the kids have been screaming all day and mom's had it up to her ears, and sometimes it's just our job to walk in and just be the steady, the constant, and keep the cool. And for me, when I think about a strong man, a father who is reliable, who's consistent, is a man who can do some of these things and also serves his family, is not putting himself on a pedestal and demanding to be served. It's a part of that in the family as well. That's so good, man. Thank you for sharing that. So, what are some things, some tips that you could give any men listening that can help them course correct if they feel like they've maybe gone a little bit wrong in their parenting, or maybe are thinking about when that will happen, and if that happens, what would I do? So, if we get this beautiful platform here where you can speak right from the horse's mouth, so what would you advise some of these young fathers to do?
So I'll rattle off a couple, and then we could come back and touch on them. One is, as early as possible, teach your kids about delayed gratification. Like, it
Mm,
has to be done through your leadership. It's a huge thing. Like, my kids know about intentional discomfort. Like, I started talking to them about intentional discomfort before they knew what either one of those words meant, but together they knew what the words meant. Like, embracing the suck. It's good. Like, once they realize, they can start at a young age realizing that this is going to be really hard. This is going to be
mm,
hard. Like, don't sugarcoat things for the kids, because the thing that I've learned too, Mitch, is that when kids know that something is going to be challenging, that this is a task in front of them, and they do whatever that task is, and they see it through to fruition. They are able to complete the challenging task. It doesn't matter if it takes them 10 minutes or 10 hours or 10 days. They see it through to fruition, and they're able to complete that challenging task with your support and guidance, and sometimes a kick in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
It lays these neurotransmitters in their brain, these like train tracks develop in their brain that they did something that was really hard, right? And so now they become the type of person that does hard things and can overcome those challenges. So the next time there's something challenging, they're able to, it's more likely that they're going to be able to complete it because they are the type of person that does that. Conversely, if they start something and you're like, it's okay, you don't have to do that. Like the whole thing with the fear of frustration, then all of a sudden there's like a break in those train tracks and there's like a divide there, like a cliff. And now they become the type of person that doesn't complete the task. And the next thing that comes up, they're more likely to give up. So help the kids delay gratification, help them understand there's going to be things that are really, really challenging and they're going to suck, but that's okay. Like and not everything is going to be easy. So start at a young age. There's a theorist, an educational theorist. His name is Lev Vygotsky. And he came up with a theory called the zone of proximal development. And the zone of proximal development, if you think of like a Venn diagram, like there's one circle, say on the left side of the diagram, that's something that's way too easy for the kid. It's something that they can do really, really easily. There's another circle that's things that are way outside of their ability level. The zone of proximal development is right in the middle. And what it is, it's like, picture a kid that's climbing up a ladder with you behind them. And the next rung of the ladder is just outside of their grasp. And they kind of have to jump a little bit to get to the next rung of the ladder, which is scary, right? And so you're there as their dad, as the parent, and you're there to support, like, listen, I got you as you make this jump to the next rung of the ladder. I'm here to support you. And then once they grab it, all right, I'm here now. I could go a little bit further, which is, I do a podcast called Building Men. The way that I end every podcast is go one step further than you thought you could go. Harking back on the zone of proximal development, because once the kids can do something that was a little bit outside of their grasp, now the next thing that's outside of their grasp, they're like, I can do this as well. It's a big thing. It's hard for us as parents to sit back and watch our kids fail at those things, but it's such an important piece of the development. So those are two things. The last thing that I'll say is, when your kids, and there's going to be struggles with your kids, they're going to push back. They're going to tell you they don't like you. They're going to, there's going to be those, I don't want to do this. This is bullshit. I hate you. You're the worst dad ever. You're going to hear those things. The way that I like to analogize this is two different ways. One, when the parents are giving in to the kid, right? Like you have an idea of like, bedtime is at 8:00 or 9:00, or you only have an hour on the video game, or you got to be home by 11:00, whatever it is. Insert boundary of your choice here. And the kid doesn't comply with it. When, as parents, we look the other way or we give into that, it's basically setting the stage for, one, the kid not feeling safe. And like you mentioned, like you being that calm, steadfast figure, they don't trust in your leadership anymore. If you give into that, it's way harder to hold the line in those situations, but it's way more important for your kid's development. Like, you're not trying to raise the best 9-year-old, you're trying to raise the best 35-year-old, 40-year-old, right? Like, I'm looking at
that's good.
the lessons that I'm teaching are not for right now because they might not like what I'm saying. It's for the future, not only for them, but for their kids and their kids' kids. So I like to think about it like this way. You're on a plane, you're going to Hawaii with your family, you're going on vacation, and the pilot comes on and he's like, listen, there's an issue, there's a safety issue, the landing gear, whatever, we need to stop in Toledo. We're gonna land in Toledo. And it would be like your kids being like, no, I want to go to Hawaii. This is bullshit. I want to go to Hawaii. And then the captain's like, all right, we'll just go to Hawaii. First of all, they're probably like, wait, is the captain going to be like, okay, we're going to go to Hawaii? And then is everybody else in the plane looking like, what the hell is going on here? We're still going to go to Hawaii, right? Like, all of a sudden, everyone loses faith in the captain of the plane by giving in, right? Crazy analogy would be like, all right, you want to go to Hawaii? Come on up here and fly the plane then, kid. None of those things would actually happen. But when we're letting the kid dictate to us, like, I don't want to do that, I don't want to go to here. Okay, we don't have to do that, right? All of a sudden, like, they become the person in charge, and they don't want that. Believe it or not, when they're pushing back, they want you to hold the ground, not as a dick in a dicky way. It's like, listen, I believe that you're feeling this certain way. I hear what you're saying. I believe this. I want to be here to listen to you. In this situation, you have a job in our family, and this is your job. This is my job, is to make sure that you're safe, that you're protected, and then I'm doing what's best in the interest of the future you, the best version of you. So this is what's going to happen in this situation. Again, I hear
Mm,
I'm going to meet that need of your voice being heard, but this is what we're going to do moving forward. So those are a couple
mhm.
little things that I would say, like as a dad, I've made some mistakes along the journey, like as far as, different things that I did with my kids, as far as rewards are concerned and things like that. But of the things that I've learned, those are three big things, definitely.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting, man, because that's actually a lot of what I talk to men about. Is men who either chronic procrastinators, or they can't seem to kick the 30 pounds, or they're not in a great place with their wife, or all that kind of stuff. And I can't remember what you called it, but it was intentionally doing difficult things. I actually call it voluntary hardship,
Right.
which is just a different.
Intentional discomfort.
Yeah, which is just a different vernacular, but it's so critical that we understand the importance of challenging ourselves and doing hard things. You mentioned Huberman, and I remember a few episodes ago he was talking about the anterior mid cingulate cortex, and what this is a brain structure that actually grows. So neuroscientists have discovered this over the past couple of years. So this anterior mid cingulate cortex actually grows when you do things that you don't want to do. Now, the key is they must be things that you don't enjoy doing, right? And so, in athletes or in high performing individuals, or people who have lost a large amount of weight or overcome a significant amount of trauma, this anterior mid-cingulate cortex is actually quite a bit larger. But then when you look at obese people and very sedentary people, and these kinds of people who never really challenge themselves, that brain structure is actually quite small. And so neuroscientists have discovered that, and through their studies, that they believe that this anterior mid-cingulate cortex is actually the key to willpower and growing your willpower and even your will to live. Because for people who are fighting to live, it grows as well. And the interesting distinction is if what you're doing is something that you begin to enjoy. So, for example, if you start weight training and you hate it, but then you start enjoying it, then it doesn't have that effect on this anterior mid-cingulate cortex anymore, and so that part of the brain begins to shrink. So, in other words, it's crucial that you continue to keep doing things that are challenging you and that may be difficult for you in order to build up resiliency and literally grow your willpower and to become a stronger man, right? Which I think is just so fascinating, because when we talk about willpower, I mean, that's such a ethereal kind of word that is, some people can't necessarily always define, or we struggle with even saying, like, how do you quantify a strong will, And so I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to like neuroscience and
I
brain
love
stuff,
it.
but
100%. Huberman's the man. I love Huberman. He's the man.
I mean, so dense. It's like 3 hours of dense. If I had $1 for every Huberman podcast episode I had to listen to like a second or third time,
Right. Oh, that
it's
without
so good.
doubt, there's so many that are just, and I sit there, I listen to it, and then I listen to it with a notebook and take down notes, or I'll like screenshot, like, all right, this was at hour like 152. I need to go back and listen to this again to make sure that I like totally get this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got like a podcast timestamp notes on my phone where I go in and like put timestamps just to make sure I can go back and check it out, because it's so I mean, it's just so valuable. I think that was a podcast episode where Goggins was on there, and Huberman ended up calling this the Goggins factor, because I mean Goggins is insane,
Right.
and he has like a willpower of a I don't know what, but that's cool, man. And so it's so interesting to hear some of those parallels between what you're teaching young boys and then what I'm coaching with men on, and they're very similar, which of course makes sense.
And
For
the thing
sure.
is, Mitch, too, like, if what if these guys had something like this when they were 15, when they were 17 years old, right? If they wouldn't have to learn the lessons when they're already leading their family. So my job is like, it's almost like trying to put you out of business in a way. Like, it's because if we can get to the kids when they're at that such an impressionable age, and when kids are going through puberty and adolescent development, their body, like the amount of changes that are going on, it's the most amount of change that they're ever going to experience in their life. Like going through puberty, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, everything across the board is changing for them. What if during that time they knew that they had a support system, someone was there to listen to them, but also to talk about these things that I didn't learn until it was like I had to relearn all of these things. I had to,
Mhm.
like, these things had to be retaught. It was like, teaching an old dog new tricks. by that time, which is much harder than doing it when their brains are still in that elastic space.
Hey, we're going to get back to the episode, but while I have you here, I wanted to ask you, would you consider helping a brother who's struggling in his life right now? Maybe it's a guy searching the internet to help save his marriage, his health, or his family. Maybe it's a man that's just behind you on this journey. And we know, statistically speaking, there are thousands of men doing this, and we know that there are probably men in your social circles that are struggling with some of these very same things. If you'd be willing to help, this is how you can help, and I promise it'll take less than 60 seconds. If you've gotten any value from this podcast so far, would you be willing to give us an honest review and subscribe to our channel, whatever channel you're listening on? If you want to take this to the next level, would you consider sending this link to a friend of yours who you know would benefit from listening to this show? Now, why would you do that? Because the more men that hear this content, the more marriages we can save, the more fathers we can help step up, and the more lives that we can change forever. This isn't just for the men. This is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come. So I want to say thank you so much for doing your part to help other men find the support that they need. Now let's get back to it. Yeah, man. So my dad wasn't around much growing up, and so I too had to learn most of these lessons the hard way when I got married. I made a lot of mistakes, hurt a lot of people because, as you know, the saying goes, "Hurt people, hurt people." And so that's another part of the reason why I started this movement, because I just believe the same thing as you. Like what you're doing is getting to the root of the problem, right? Like you're digging at the root, getting them when they're young. And I'm kind of coming in a little bit later when they've already messed up a couple things and they're trying to figure it out. But in any case, I love this ability to be able to speak to some of these core things that that men struggle with, whether they're in, you're teaching them as teenagers or as they get older. So this is totally resonating with me, and that's what I love about this podcast, especially because I know that whether the person's thinking about this, contextualizing this for their sons or contextualizing this for themselves, it's a win-win for both father and son. Do you have a couple more tips that maybe you would tell fathers who are listening? Maybe there are things that you said that you would say, these are things that I wish I knew.
Right.
And if I had a man speak into my life when I was 22 or 23, becoming a new father, what are a couple more things you'd share with them?
I'll rattle off like five or so. Just tips that I wish I knew as a new dad. One
Hit us
is
with it.
developmental needs of your kids, right? So, like I've quantified like five developmental needs that kids have, and human beings in particular. But the need for autonomy, to feel like your voice is a part of the space. So, like, are there things that you can get your kid's voice in there? Giving them an option, even if it's you have an option to go to bed, like brush your teeth, do the dishes, do this and this, and then go to bed. Or it's like you could do them in reverse order, but still whatever you want to happen, but give them a little bit of a voice. And as they get older, they have more of a voice. It's a need that they have. The need for competence, to feel good about themselves and what they're doing. So again, like these little frustrations and failures, like honor the process of them doing it.
Mm,
And that gets into the idea of like process versus product. Like whenever you're going to praise your kids, and here's like a quick aside, the book Mindset by Carol Dweck was a game changer for me, not only as an educator but as a parent. One mistake that I made with my son as he was growing up was like praising the identity. You are the smartest kid. You're the best athlete. You're the best football player. You have the best arm. You're the best foul shooter. You're the smartest kid in the class. Like, and I thought those were good things, right? And like inherently, you would think that's great. Like, you want to praise your kids, but it actually does the reverse. When you're praising identity for a kid, so say, they hit a home run. You are the best baseball player. Like, oh, that was awesome. You are the best. You are the best hitter on the whole team. And the next time they go out there and they strike out three times, them being the best at something was associated with them hitting the home run. So now
mm,
they're not living up to whatever that ideal was. So the same thing goes with their grades in school. Oh, you're the smartest kid in the class. You got 100 on this. And then they get a 62 on the next thing. Now, all of a sudden, but what they can always do is work harder. So
mm,
what I stopped doing with my kids 100% now is I don't praise the identity. I praise the process. So
mm,
if my daughter plays softball, she hits a home run in a game. hey, Jules, you hit a home run in the game. Like, you worked your ass off. You were out taking batting practice. You spent extra time at the tee. You've been going to the gym. Like, that was why you got the result, because you are a hardworking kid. You got the whatever on the test. You studied your ass off last night for that. Like, you put in the time and effort that went along with it. So the connection is always between the work that they put in and the result that they get. The other thing I like to do too is, instead of saying like, "Oh, that's awesome, that's great, way to go," which there's a time and space for that, but I'm also not just a white noise praiser with my kids. What I like to do is I like to ask them questions about whatever it was. So
Mm.
say I was using the example of the home run, instead of saying like, "Oh, that was so awesome, that was so great, you hit a home run, you're the best." I would be like, "How did it feel as you were rounding third base? Tell me about the feeling that you had," or after you hit a home run, what went through your head, or like I try to connect questions to it. Or if they do well in school, "Oh, that was so great, that was so great." I'd be like, "What's the next thing you want to learn?" Or,
Mm.
"What was the most challenging thing about that assignment?" It's a little bit more effort on our part to ask like engaging questions, but what that does is it helps the kid think about the work that was put into whatever it was, and it helps them think about what's the next thing that I want to do, instead of it just being they did something and they get the praise. Because what that turns into, Mitch, is the kids are just going to do the thing for the praise. So it's
That's it.
not about whatever it is, it's about just getting the sticker, the scoop of ice cream, the extra thing in the allowance. So that's
Mm.
another thing I learned. Back to the developmental needs of the kids after autonomy and competence. It's fun. Kids need to have fun. We need to do
Mm.
whatever we can to help them meet that need. And as a dad, especially with boys, they like to roughhouse, they like to compete. What I like to think about is to be a channel for the energy instead of a dam. So like they're gonna be doing some stupid stuff that's pretty dangerous, and talking about like guys that we like are enamored with. Jordan Peterson is a guy that I love. And Peterson talks about let your kids do dangerous things carefully. If they're not doing something carefully, then be the channel. So like be the thing that can channel that energy in a positive direction. If they're doing something super dangerous, as a dad, what you can do is like, okay, how can we work together and I can channel that energy in a positive direction. All right, so
Mm.
let's see how fast we can run here. Can we, if they're throwing like rocks at something that can break, instead let's throw rocks at the tree and see how many times in a row we could hit the tree. Like little things like that you
Yeah.
can do to like channel that energy. And also recognize, and again, a quick aside before I finish up the developmental needs, quick aside, when you think about competition with your kids, I think it's super important to teach your kids about competition, right? Kids are born with all of these emotions, but they're not born with the skills to deal with the results of the emotion that they're feeling. So, as kids are competing at an early age, talk to them about the feeling associated with competition, winning and losing, right? I think it's good for your kids to lose at games. So when I play games with my kids, especially when they were younger, now, I mean, my son can beat me in most, like I'm 47 years old. He's 18, 19 years old. Like he could get around me playing basketball. It's like, but what I would do when they were younger, if we're going to compete at something, I would say, do you want me to compete as a good 10-year-old or as a 42-year-old? Like, how do you
Mm.
want me to play you like a kid that's your age, which will be a little bit different than me, swatting every shot that he takes. And he's sometimes like, "No, I want you to play me, dad." And then if he comes to the hoop, I'm gonna block his shot every single time. And if he gets frustrated, I'll be like, "Okay, what's the frustration you're feeling?" "Well, you're blocking every shot." "All right, so what can we learn from this?" Don't
Mm.
bring it to the hole when there's a guy who's 6'4" and you're 5'1". Take a jump
Yeah.
shot, right? So there's some learning experiences there. And then I also talk to my kids about competition in a way like, all right, as we're playing games, can we compete together against something? All right, so we have 10 minutes and our goal in 10 minutes is to make 50 jump shots. You and I are
Mm.
going to do this together. So we're competing together against a thing, whatever that thing is. And whatever sport you're playing or whatever it is, you can work together to compete against a thing. So that's another quick aside. The last two developmental needs for kids are the need for relationships, not only with you as their dad, with their mom, with their siblings, with friends, and with other adult male role models.
Mm.
Only like 1 in 3 young men that are growing up in their adolescent years does not have a positive male role model. And boys that don't have a positive male role model are 4 times more likely to live in poverty as an adult, 4 times more likely to live in poverty. The stats are absolutely ridiculous. And they're 2 times more likely to commit a violent crime as a teenager. Boys that do not have a positive male role model are 2 times
Wow.
likely to commit a violent crime. It's absolutely wild, right? So relationships with other adult male role models. Like they, especially your boys, need to see you as their dad interacting in a positive way with other men, not just out pounding beers and watching the game. Like in conversations, like can they see when you're working on the fence together? Invite your buddy over and have your son come out there and like teach him as that experience is going on. So the need for relationship, and the final thing is the need for safety. And so they need to feel, when kids feel safe in an environment, they're more likely to take risks. And risks are super important for kids to take, right? Like not just playing it safe all the time, but to feel safe to take a risk, a calculated risk. And so what can you do? Like I believe that lessons are caught and not taught. Can your kids see you doing all of these things? So again, the quick
Mm.
autonomy, competence, fun, relationship, safety. Those are those 5 needs. What can you do to intentionally meet those 5 needs for your kids?
That's so good, man. Well, listen, if you guys are watching and listening to this, you're gonna need to like pause and rewind and make some notes in your phone. I know I've been taking notes here, and I'll tell you what, I'm gonna put timestamps for all of these little points here so that you can use them as a quick grab, because this is dense, man. There's a lot of incredible stuff you're sharing with us, Dennis. So I appreciate, man, those 5 needs, and that's so good. I love your point about the questions, because I actually think about those questions in the context of, I talk to a lot of men about generative questions with their wives. So, for example, when you get up in the morning, instead of just saying, "How'd you sleep?" Or when they come home from work, instead of, "How was work?" or "How were the kids?" You can say, "Hey, what was like a bright spot in your day?" Or where was there a moment of gratitude in your day, and what happened? And applying that concept to your children, of course, is brilliant, man. I love that.
You got to do.
Okay. All right. I just want to be conscious of our time. I'm gonna definitely have to ask you back, because I wanna do this again and unpack some of this stuff, because we're just blitzing through some of these things, but it's so good. I want to ask you one question that I ask everybody on this show. Now I want you to picture, it's a little bit morbid. We're gonna think about our death for a second, but I want you to picture your funeral's happening. You're kind of having this out of body experience, right? Now the funeral just finishes up, and everyone, you got your little get together at the house after, and everyone's leaving, and there's just, your wife and your 3 kids sitting around the table, and they're just reminiscing about dad, reminiscing about, Dennis, and the husband and the father that he was. And you're able to, like I said, you're having this out of body experience, and you're able to listen in and hear what your kids are saying about the man that you were, about the father that you were. Now, if you could hear them say 1 or 2 things about the life that you lived and who you were while you were alive on this earth, what would those things be?
Wow, dude. Yeah, it's good to save this to the end. I mean, I'm sure this is the tear jerking moment that you get a lot of, guys that get emotional during this. Um, so I would say they would all say that I had this unwavering belief in them as human beings, that I was able to carry like the emotional, like the things that they were unable to carry at the moment. I was able to carry it for them until they were strong enough to carry it for themselves. But the whole time, my goal was to create an environment where they knew that they were capable of doing anything. So
Mm,
I think it would be like what they would say about me is feelings that they have about themselves. It would be
mm,
like, by the man that I was and the lessons that I taught them and how I was able to overcome really difficult situations, which I'm part too. I mean, we could dive into some crazy situations, not only when I was a young man, but like as I was developing building men do, because it was like there were some moments where it was like ramen noodles for months because like I was almost broke. It was some scary times as I was building this up, but I really feel like it would be around the legacy that I created and the way that I was able to create an environment that they were able to fully believe in who they were, to be able to take risks, to understand that failure was a huge part of the process, and that they were able to live more fulfilling lives, and they're more confident in themselves, and they are better human beings because I existed on this planet. I don't think it would
mm,
be about, not so much about me. It would be about who they are because of my interaction with them. I think that would
mm.
be what I would love to hear.
Cool, man. Well, hey, thanks for sharing that. I love that question, man, because it really helps us refocus on what's most important. And often the men who share this, this question. It also helps those listeners be able to peel back some of the layers and helps them refocus as to what's the most important thing in their fatherhood journey and their marriages. So thank you for sharing, man. And you know what? I just want to say again, thank you for hanging in there through those rough years and living on the ramen, because these years later, man, you've just had an incredible impact, and it's a noble vision, and you're doing an incredible work. And we know, and you're not done, man. I think you're just warming up. So this is good stuff. Last thing, where can, for the guys who are listening and the guys who want to consume more of your content, or to maybe book you to come talk to their kids or their schools or whatever the case is, where can we find you on the internet? And then how can we best support you?
Thank you, man. I appreciate the conversation. Truly, dude. I'm happy to be a part of your vision and what you're doing, and honored to be a guest on this show, man. I really, really appreciate it. So the three different ways to find me, the website is buildingmen.io is my website. That's where, you can find out about the work, like me doing a workshop, me coming into a school and doing, programming in a school. The foundation is it's my online group community for boys, pretty much, in middle school and in high school. That meets once every 2 weeks. We do it virtually, and I bring on guest mentors. We have conversations, and we give boys practical strategies, and it's a community, an online community for boys. Like, it's a mastermind for kids, which is like, it's unheard of. It's such a powerful thing. And I absolutely love it. It's an hour every 2 weeks, and it's my favorite hour that goes on every 2 weeks. And then I do individual coaching. I keep that to, pretty exclusive, group. I only do, between 10, 15 kids that I meet with like once a month, and I have touch points with the parents as well, because typically what happens when there's a situation going on with the boy, there's something that I can do to help the parents, like in this capacity. So I'll coach kids, but also work with the parents. On Instagram, it's building.men. I post daily content on there. And on the Building Men podcast, there's 201 episodes. I release an episode every single Friday morning. Some really, really cool guests I've had on there. And I'd love to have you on as a guest. I'll throw this out there to you. I'd love to have you on and promote your message and see what I can do to support anything that you're doing. So if you know anyone who either is raising a young man, is a young man that could benefit from the message, all the stuff that I'm doing is all word of mouth. I don't do a whole lot of advertising, so it's a lot of word of mouth stuff. So again, thanks for the opportunity, brother.
Yeah, man. I'm thinking about several guys who I've actually been having conversations with through just in the DMs through Instagram, who've been reaching out to me and with challenges and struggles they're having. And so I know this conversation is going to be so good for them to hear. And I'm going to be sending them direct links to this episode. And then if you're watching on YouTube, to you guys listening, I'm going to put all of his links in the comment section below the video. And if you're listening on audio, I also just found out you can put links in like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that, which I didn't even know. So click those links as well. But you also heard him mention it as well in Audible. So thanks again, Dennis. This was an incredible conversation, man. I've got so much to process and think through, and I'm gonna listen back to this and make some notes, and I'm gonna be sending it to some of my buddies who are fairly new onto this fatherhood journey as well. So listen, man, have a great day, and we are going to catch up real soon.
You got it, my man. Thanks again.
Man, what an incredible episode that was. Man, I've got so much to process and think through as I think about my parenting journey as a father. And if you're listening to this and you're a father and you have a son, or if you're planning to have a son or hoping to have a son, I want to hear from you, okay? If you're watching on YouTube, leave it in the comments below. What was the biggest insight for you? And let's start that dialogue about what you're learning and what I'm learning. And as always, don't forget to follow the show. If you're listening on audio, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And listen, don't miss next week's episode, where I'm going to be talking about 5 ways to maximize your time and kill your procrastination, okay? If you are a busy guy, a busy father, husband, or busy professional, and you find yourself getting stuck in this rut of procrastination, or you just can't seem to get to be productive as you want to be, I'm going to give you a bunch of tools that's going to help you level up in your production and crush that procrastination, okay? So listen, have an amazing week. This is Monday. As I always say, you've got the rest of the week to crush it, okay? Listen, as always, I'm in your corner, rooting for you. Okay, have an incredible day. We'll talk soon.